Hey, what's up, guys? I'm David Demuzio.
And I'm Steve Cook.
This is Hair Loss Hope, and today we're going to find out if you are a perfect hair transplant candidate. Steve and I recently did a reaction video to a Norwood 5, Norwood 6 patient who was a perfect hair transplant candidate. And so it kind of inspired us to make this video and find out if you are. If you are, and you check all of these boxes, well, guess what? Find a little money and a great surgeon, and your hair loss dreams can come true. It could happen to you. Let's find out. Number one, okay? You respond extremely well to Finasteride and or minoxidil. The pill I'm on, it's oral minoxidil and Finasteride and some biotin kind of thrown in, all combined. I respond pretty well. I wouldn't consider myself to be a super responder at all. I remember when I first got on Finasteride, I actually didn't really see like a lot of positive response, but I don't have any sort of negative reaction to it. So I would consider myself anyway, just like an average responder. But let's say you're a super responder, and I'm talking about some of these guys, and you'll see them on the internet, plenty of them, you know, because people like to show the best results of anything, who are often quite bald or balding quite a lot. And then they take Finasteride or oral minoxidil or whatever, and it's like, boom. It's like suddenly they're a chia pet. And now I'm showing my age. Okay, so we'll move on. Next would be you are of Middle Eastern descent or like Hispanic Spanish descent, right?
Correct.
So they have the two best, typically the two best kinds of like donor hair in the world. They have the strongest, thickest, and when I say strongest, I don't mean necessarily that they don't lose their hair. I mean the actual diameter of each individual strand of hair is quite thick. And so it actually, people don't realize that from one person to another, the actual diameter of your hair can differ quite greatly. And so when you have a larger diameter hair, like a thicker strand per hair, it takes up more space on your head. Another great thing about people generally of this kind of descent is that they have a higher hair per graft average. So the average hair per graft, if we're talking like FUE, is what, Steve?
Well, it's 2.2 to 2.5 is a good range. And that goes across all different types of races.
Okay. So on the recent video that we watched, the hair per graft on this guy was 2.9. So well above average, meaning every single graft that is being extracted with FUE in this case, they're actually getting more hair. So not as many grafts have to be extracted because the hair is so thick and there's just so much of it per graft. So kind of on that same thread is actually the way that your hair moves on your head. Is it straight? Is it curly? Is it wavy? So the best kind of hair as a hair transplant candidate that you can have is, I would say, actually curly is probably the best, right?
Yeah, curly, wavy. We talked about Middle Eastern and Spanish descent. African American is also, or African, is very good hair as well. It's harder to do the procedure, but it's really good. And that's the curly, kinky, wavy, which is really the best.
Okay, because this takes up more space. Again, a straight hair just takes up kind of one space. So if you're looking at it head on, you're looking at it like this, right? So you just see this one little point. But if it kinks and curls and moves, then it's taking up actually, when it moves, more space on the head. So you're gonna, again, get a fuller looking result because of this. Respond well, super responder Finasteride. You have a very thick diameter hair. Your hair is curly or wavy. Contrast, and that is that you don't have a lot of contrast between your hair and the scalp. So for instance, dark hair, light scalp, lots of contrast, right? White hair and dark scalp is going to be, maybe it's like a kid from Papua New Guinea. A lot of in Papua New Guinea, it's like pretty wild. You'll go there and they all, like a lot of the black people there actually have naturally blonde hair. It's really wild, but you go around there, it's very common. So that would make them less of a good hair transplant candidate because their hair is blonde and their skin is black. Same thing if you have black hair. I have quite dark hair and light skin, so not as good of a hair transplant candidate in that category. I went in some other ones, like I've got more wavy kind of hair, so that works. The next one would be that you have just generally very thick donor hair. Now this can kind of go back to, whether the ropey hair and all that sort of thing, but some people just have naturally denser hair on the sides of their head. They just like have a lot of density there for whatever reason. So that would make you a better candidate for a hair transplant. Another one is kind of going into that same lack of contrast is also if you've had skin micropigmentation already, then that, as long as it's not gonna be like too far down and mess with the hairline, then you have to get it removed, that could make you a better hair transplant candidate as far as getting the best looking results because, again, lack of contrast from your hair to your scalp.
One more comment about the micropigmentation, since I am such a big fan of that. The reason I'm a big fan is for that exact reason. I've always said that all of us want to chase the density. Everybody says that's our favorite word. I need more density. Give me more density. I mean, if you use a little bit of powder on your hair, that's worth one hair transplant. Yeah. If you don't want to use the powder, maybe try micropigmentation. So in the case that we were just talking about with the Norwood 5 or 6, he had already had micropigmentation to try that out first. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. It ended up being an advantage because it tinted his skin the same color or close to it as the hair. And his result, I've been looking at a lot of heads of hair my whole life, looks incredible anyway, but the darker the skin, the better the result.
And I'll throw in a last one that might not be necessarily as important and could change over time, but there was one thing that I didn't really think about as much until I watched the video of this patient, and that was that this patient already knew how he wanted to comb his hair. He already had a certain hairstyle that he decided he wanted to go with, and so the fact that he knew that, hopefully he doesn't change his mind, actually helped with the way that the surgeon placed the grafts and where they sort of added the most density. So having a pretty clear plan that you think you're going to be able to stick with very long term, because this is permanent surgery, could also add to, your kind of space as a perfect hair transplant candidate. And if you want to get into the last one, throwing this out there, and that is kind of just like to go with some emotions, that is confidence, and already a confidence and sort of a confidence in who you are and who you want to be, and sort of an ability and willingness to go through this transformational experience. Because you got to realize that when you're going to have a hair transplant, your hair is going to fall out after the hair transplant, probably around 2 months, a month to 2 months, 3 months. All that hair transplanted hair is going to fall out. It's going to suddenly look probably even worse than it did before your hair transplant. So that's something you have to go through. And to be able to go through that whole emotional process of then going, okay, now I'm like 3.5 months. Is my hair going to grow? Is it not going to grow? And that whole thing, it's a bit to go through unless you're in the right emotional space. So if you also you're in a good emotional space, you already feel like pretty good about your life and the direction that things are going, then that makes you an even better hair transplant candidate. So leave a comment, let us know how many of these boxes do you tick, and are you a perfect hair transplant candidate? Boy, I hope you are, because then your dreams are soon to come true.